Hello everyone, welcome to this video. I am Chudman Namde. In this video, I am going to teach you about the state feature and the binding feature we have in SwiftUI. Now let me start with the state feature. The state feature is used to hold a local state variable in a view. Now see here, we have this structure, content view, that adopts a view protocol. So this structure represents a single view in SwiftUI. Now we have this body, which is a computed property and also adopts the view protocol. This sum keyword here denotes that this body must return a view element or view element. So you can see in between in this closure, it returns a view element, which is the v stack. Now let's see how the state variable works. Now let me say we have a variable var counter declared to 0, and then we display it here, text counter. Oh, sorry. So we need to use this and then come here. Then you see we have displayed it. Now let me make it much more bolder so that we can see it. Now we have displayed this variable counter in this text. Now if we try to update this counter to any value, like let me say 90, 100, -1 or 2 or 3. Now when we update this variable, the update in this counter is not going to reflect here. We will still have 0 being displayed in our app. This is because this counter variable is not a state variable, so it is not going to update at all. No matter if we click on the screen, it is not going to update at all. So now to be able to make this counter to update this content view so as to be able to reflect the new changes made to this state variable here, we need to make this variable to become a state variable. Now to do that, we will use the @state property wrapper. This is how it's done. We will come to the left of the variable, then start with the symbol, then followed by the state keyword. So with this, we have made this counter to become a state variable by just doing this, so that whenever we update the value of this counter, SwiftUI will have to recompute, trigger a render in the content view, and then it will recompute this body so that this text will be updated or rendered to show the newest value of the counter state variable that it renders. Now let us update this counter. First, let's put a button here. Let me say increment. Then I come here and just say change it to 90. Now let our view rebuild. Now if I click on this increment button, it's going to run this code and change or update the counter variable to 90. Now because this counter is a state variable, now SwiftUI will recompute this so as to update this text to reflect the new value of this counter, which is 90. So we are going to see 90 here when we click on this increment. So you see we have 90. Without this state variable, this will not work. We will still be seeing 0 here because the SwiftUI is not going to recompute or rebuild this body view. Now let's make it a full increment. So when we click on this increment, we will be seeing an increase by 1 of our counter from its current value. So you see it works. So you see this @state variable here is just like use state in React.js or in Angular by declaring state variables in the components body. So doing this just in React, just like using use state, and whenever you increment or change the state, using set state or any other update function, the component will render to reflect the new changes. That's exactly happens in SwiftUI here. So whenever we click on this button and a change is made to this counter state variable, SwiftUI will have to rebuild the view, rebuild the computed body view so as to reflect the new change of the state variable that was affected. Now, we can also define multiple state variables in a view in SwiftUI. Now, let's define another variable. Let's say age 90. We'll come here and display the age. And we'll say age here, text, and now display the age variable. Then let's make it big. So you'll see we have our age 90 here. Now let's add a button to increment the age. Now let's say increment age by 1. Then we'll add our closure function and come here and say age, increment it by 1, age plus 1. So our view is rebuilding. So you see, whenever we click on this button, it will change this age by 1 from its current value. Then, because this age is a state variable, SwiftUI will trigger a render in this content view, and then it will recompute the value of this body, and then render the newest value of the age property. So let's try it. Increment age by 1. You see, it goes up, and we see the current value of the age property. Now we can also change the state variables altogether. Now let's add a reset button that resets the state variable to 0. So we'll come here and say counter 0 age 0. So this resets the two state variables counter and age to 0. So when this is run, still the same thing will occur. SwiftUI will mark this content view to be rendered. Then on the change detection run, the body view will be recomputed, and then this counter will be displayed. This text will be rendered to display the newest value of the counter and age properties. Now let me increment to some value, Then when we click on reset, everything goes to 0. So you see, that's the power of state variables in SwiftUI. So you see, they are very easy to use. Just simply declare your variable and then annotate it with the @state wrapper. So you see state, a property wrapper type that can read and write a value managed by SwiftUI. So you say use a state as a single source of truth for a given value type that you store in a view hierarchy. Create a state value in app or sim. So you see, we can use it as a state or as a single source of truth. So you see it. Now, we can use any type. You see, for example, we have been using int and int. Now, let's use a state variable with a different data type. Now, let me say @state var. Now, let me say visible to be a boolean. So you see, we're now using. So you see, we're now using another data type boolean. Yeah. Also, it will work. Now, let's come here and say toggle view. So let's use this state variable visible to toggle the view of this on and off. So we are going to wrap these views in an if statement. Very good. So we'll come here and just say visible dot toggle. Very good. So here we declare the state variable visible, which is a boolean initialized to true. So whenever we change this visible, like always, SwiftUI will mark this content view to be rendered, and then when it's rendered, this body will be recomputed, and then the state will be reflected here. So this will now be recomputed to know whether to display whatever that is in between these braces or not. So you see, we are now doing conditional rendering with a state variable. Just like the same thing we can do in React.js and also in Angular or Vue.js or any other frameworks that you are familiar with. So if we click on this, visible.toggle will be toggling this visible from true to false or from false to true, depending on its current value. So let's come here. We have the view render. So if I click on this, you see the view goes off because this toggle is a property in the Boolean extension of protocol that will be flipping the value from true to false. So when this button was clicked, this toggle was called, then it flipped the value of this state variable visible from true to false. So it caused the render in this content view. And in that case, this body property was recomputed, and then this if condition was also rerun. So it was rerun and this visible is false. Then everything inside its braces disappeared from the view, and we are left with this button. So you see the conditional rendering we are able to achieve using state variable. Now when we click on this toggle view again, the whole view will show. Now remember, this rendering true or false does not change the value in it. So when this goes off and comes up, we will still see the current values in the counter and in the age. Let's try it. Now let's increment to 3. So we have 3 here. Increment to 3. We have 93 and we have 3. Then when we toggle the view off, when we toggle it on again, we'll still see the counter 3 and age 93. So you see. So when we affected this visible and this content view was rendered, we still maintained the same state we have here when this content view was rendered and this body recomputed. It maintained the state. So it will maintain this state until this content view is destroyed. So that's the power of state variable and also being able to use it to do conditional rendering in SwiftUI. So now let's move over to the at binding. Now the binding is used to establish a two-way connection between two state variables in a parent and also in a child view. So it's just like a two-way connection or two-way communication, just like we have the input and output in Angular or React. Now let's see how we can do it. Here we have these two views, increments and this text. So this increment increments the counter and this text displays it. Now we can extract this into another view. Now let's do it. Let's go to extract subview. So it will move them. Okay, it only move the button. Now I can also copy this to the extracted view. We have the extracted view here. Very good. So we have the extracted view here. You see that the extracted view adopts the view protocol and also has this body computed property. So also like this content view, like I said before, this is used to define a single view in SwiftUI. So with this, we will render this inside the body of this content view and it will display the views returned by its body computed property. Now we have two views, the content view and also the extracted view, and we can use this extracted view in this content view like we did here. It works. Now we have a problem. This button here is incrementing the counter. Now the question is, how do this button incrementing this counter going to affect this counter here? we need to find a way to make that connection so that when this button is incremented, when this button is clicked, this counter is incremented here in the extracted view, it should also touch update this counter so that this content view will have to render to show the newest value. How do we do it? That's where the binding comes. First, we will have to declare a local state here in the extracted view to hold the counter. Let's call it var counter, which is an int. Now, for clarity's sake, let me change the name. Let me call it counter extracted. For a lack of name right now, so let me just call it counter extracted. So we are going to use it here. Very good. Now you see this button increments this variable here. Now we need to make a connection from this counter extracted property in this extracted view to this counter state variable in this content view. Now, by doing this, we have made this variable to become an input parameter whenever we render this extracted view. So we come to this extracted view here, then pass the counter extracted as a label inside this parenthesis, just like the input parameter, and then we'll have to pass this counter to it like this. Now we need to do the binding. To do the binding, we'll come down to this var counter extracted, then add at binding property wrapper. So this tells Swift that this counter extracted is bound to a certain property, to the parent view that renders it. Now to do that, we'll come to this content view and then bind this counter to the counter extracted. So as we have passed the counter here, to make the binding complete, we'll come to its left hand side and add the dollar symbol. Now our two-way connection has been established. So whenever the value in this counter changes, it will affect the value in this counter state variable. So by using this dollar symbol to the counter variable passed to this counter extracted, we have successfully made a two-way connection between the counter variable in this content view to the counter extracted variable in this extracted view, child view. So whenever this button makes an update to the counter extracted, it will update or reflect in this counter so that this content view will have to render. Now let's do it here. Let's increment. You see, it works. It works. So let's change its name from extracted view to, let's call it counter view. Come here and call it counter view. Now, see, as we have done with the counter, now let's replicate what we have done here in this image. Now we have to extract this button and text to a sub view. So now let's call it edge view. Come and call it edge view. Very good. Then let's copy this text because it still belongs to it. We'll come here and add the edge. Now, very good. We'll come here and say, then we'll need to bind edge to this edge state variable in the content view. Now let's call it here. Let's call the edge extracted. It's an int. Then we copy it. We can still leave the edge as it is. In fact, let's leave it as it is. So what we're going to do, just like we'll now define edge here, then make a binding using the at binding annotation. Very good. Then we'll now come up here and complete the two-way binding because we have age as a as a variable here. So it becomes an input parameter label. So we'll come here and say age, then followed by a colon, then a dollar symbol, and we'll now pass in the age parameter. So our view will render. It's still building. Okay. So when this rebuilds, we're going to see it. Very good. Increment by 1. You will see it works. Now, also, let me move this button to another view. Let me extract into subview. Now, let's call it reset button view. So see the view here, we'll call it reset button view. Now, in this case, you see, no, no, not the toggle view. I want just this button reset view. Extract subview. Very good. Call it reset button view. Then we copy it. Copy the name of the structure. We'll come here and place it reset button view. Now see, this view is affecting, the button here is affecting two state variables, counter and age. So we'll still do the same thing we did in this age view and in the counter view. So what we're going to do, we are going to create a variable in this reset button view structure. We are going to declare a counter variable and also the age variable inside here. Now let's do it. Counter int and age int. Then we'll now have to annotate them with the binding. So you see, we can actually bind to multiple variables, not actually one. So as you're doing here, you see we are binding to two variables, counter and age, because this button is affecting two state variables outside of its parent view. So we are done with this reset button view. What we are going to do is finally come here, and then remember that as we have two state variables here, two of them becomes an input label to this reset button view structure. So look at how we're now going to use it. We'll come here and say counter, and then followed by dollar, then passing in the counter variable in the content view structure. Then we have to add a comma, because remember we have two state variables in the reset button view. Finally we'll pass age, colon, then dollar view, followed by this age variable in the content view. So you see we have established a two-way connection, a two-way binding between content and age variables in the content view to the reset button, counter and age variables. So when two of them changes in the reset button view, it will come up to this content view and change the counter and age variable also. It will trigger a render and this button will be recomputed. So let's see how it works. Now let's increment to 7, increment to 7, then click on reset. You see it still works. With the binding, it still works. So that's all for this video. So thank you so much for sticking with me to the end. If you have any question or confusion, please don't forget to type it down in the comment box. I will be there to attend to all your questions and answer you. And also, if you find any topic in SwiftUI confusing or very hard to understand, you can also comment it and I'll be glad to do a video on it to explain in details whatever you are finding difficult to understand. Thank you so much. Please like, share, subscribe to my channel for more content like this. Thank you and see you in the next video.